Welcome to Lead Out Loud, the podcast from Warwick Business School, where bold ideas, groundbreaking leadership, and core insights come together. I'm your host, Bron Mills, and in each episode, we dive deep into the strategies, stories, and science behind leading with a purpose and passion. So today we're going to be diving into a topic that's really close to everyone's hearts and often overlooked, but I thought given it's January, it'll be something really nice to start the year on a positive note. And we're going to kick things off with well-being driven leadership. So for that reason, today joining me are Holly Matthews, founder of the Happy Me Project, and Joshua Fullard, an assistant professor in behavioural science. So Holly, tell us a little bit about your history, your career, and how you ended up with your new projects.
Yeah, it's never a straightforward linear route, of course. So I started out as a TV actress when I was 11 years old. I got a part on a show called Biker Grove, which probably no one knows what it is now. But Ant and Dec, Celebrity Jungle, whatever it's called, that one, they're from that. So I started out as an actress and I thought that's all I would ever do. In the background of that, I was always, because the acting world is very much, a lot of knockbacks in the acting world, a lot of resilience needed to be in that world. I became fascinated with our minds. So I was always working on my mind and trying to learn how to bounce back and reading all of these psychology books. And in fact, my first thing was Paul McKenna's hypnosis tapes, probably because I'm old, from the library. That's where I became interested in what does that mean? How do you do hypnosis? So I was doing all this stuff in the background, but I only ever thought I would do that for myself. Over the years, a series of human things happened in my life, one of them being the death of my husband, Ross, to brain cancer, that shifted me out of the acting space and kind of brought me into a stillness to an extent where I had to relook at my life. And because I don't deal with stillness very well, I needed to put that pain somewhere. And so I started to talk about the stuff that I had always understood and known. I found that my direct delivery meant that people kind of gravitated towards the things that I was saying. And then after the death of my husband, during his illness, and then after the death of my husband, I created the Happy Me Project. And the Happy Me Project was initially a little course that I put together on my phone at the bottom of my stairs with some scribblings on some envelopes. And I put it out into the world thinking, I don't know if anyone will want it, but it's an answer to all of these questions that people are asking me. And it just had legs. And then over the last 7 years since his death, I have written 2 books. I have done events all over the country, all around the world. And I've done lots and lots of TEDx and all of the things. And my work now is around helping people to feel more happy and less crappy, and finding their confidence is my new thing and my new book. And yeah, that's what brought me into this space. I always say, but acting is, when I'm acting, I'm fascinated by people's minds and I then learn about them as the character, but then I pretend to be them. Mm-hmm. The work that I'm doing now as a coach, I learn about people's minds. I understand them. I just no longer pretend to be my clients, because unless we get to know each other really well, and then I might try.
Yeah, otherwise it's a bit strange.
It's inappropriate.
Yeah. But on the sphere of well-being and happiness, this is what we want to enter this year doing as leaders, as anyone who's trying to sort of hit the ground running for 2025. So this is why we thought you might be perfect opposite Josh. So Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do here?
Yes, I love the more happy, less crappy tagline. What a lovely start to the year. I mean, that's just fun. This sounds great.
Best way.
Yeah, so yes, I'm Josh. I'm a behavioural scientist, and what I'm ultimately understanding is when people make really important decisions, so this is like what job to go into, do I continue to stay in education, do I decide to quit a job, what do I do in my job, what do my workplace, kind of these important decisions. I want to know, well, what are the factors that influence in this? And kind of knowing that, we can better create kind of environments or kind of policies that actually help make, hopefully, people happy in the world a little bit better place.
Yeah. So what is it that drove you, little Josh, to end up where you are now at Warwick Business School in the behavioural science department?
Yeah, so it's really, I've always had a passion for education. So I've always been really lucky in that, so both my parents are teachers and my wife's a teacher. So I'm very much in a, teaching education focused environment. So it's very much like a passion for learning and kind of exploring kind of what's happening in the world, if you will. And one of the things that kind of really pushed me to, well, I want to understand like the education space. So I specifically do research on teachers and education, because I think these people are, like, they shape the young minds of the future and help kind of build the ability for us to kind of deal with the challenges kind of for the next generation. So I'm really fascinated on kind of teachers and education. So my work's kind of specifically in that area, but it's kind of like it generalizes, broadly speaking, to kind of a wider world in the workforce.
Well, that's it, because we want to start applying the concepts of well-being and putting yourself first and the more happy thing at the forefront of everything we're doing. So if you had to kind of whittle it down, what is it that well-being means to you? Let's start with you, Holly.
So for me, it's about, I think, choice and freedom to be who you want to be. I think a lot of the time in life, we try to mold ourselves into a certain version of us that we think that people are going to like and people are going to be okay with. And the more that we do that, the more unhappy we become. The more we make choices that are based on what we think other people need us to be or do, or, you know, we have people that will choose a course or choose to do a certain thing because their parents did it, or because their parents thought they were going to do that, or because they think that that will be the key to their happiness. But I think for me, well-being comes down to checking in on yourself, being self-compassionate, and working with your brain and not against it. Any time in my life when I've tried to be something that I'm inherently not, or I've tried to fit into a certain mold, and bear in mind, I literally became an actress to do that. That kind of level of masking, I had to take that too far. It doesn't make you feel happy. So for me, it's leaning into your weird. When you lean into whoever you are, your quirks and your your unusual things that you do, lean into that and you'll find your root and you'll find your happiness.
How would you determine well-being?
So I'd actually like to echo exactly what Holly said.
I love
So
that.
what Holly said actually links to kind of some really fascinating kind of behavioral science concept.
Okay.
So one here is called kind of keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
So it's the idea that kind of like utility or the happiness you get from doing something, it's often relative to what other people are doing. And what I'd kind of argue is, well, actually, you're exactly right. You need to find happiness in actually what you're doing and actually be content with where you are in life, and actually learn to be okay with yourself and not do things based on what other people are doing. And this is actually kind of, I think, fundamentally one of the biggest issues we have in society, where everyone's trying to one-up each other. 100%. Because, oh, you're going on a holiday, you're going on a skiing holiday to Switzerland, I'm going to Canada. And it's just a constant competition, where actually you should just be really happy with all the opportunities you've had and whatever situation you're in. So it's
100%.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I like the theme of authenticity here. So if we're going to apply this authentic well-being, putting your authentic self first into a leadership space, I think from what both you are saying, especially with you in education and you as a coach, you've got your clients, and when you're doing your public speaking, you've got audiences and you've got people who are looking up to you and coming to you for advice. And so how difficult is it to communicate that sort of as a well-being leader, if you like? You've got people listening to you and you're trying to give advice. Be yourself. Are people looking for tips when they're struggling? Like what caused that kind of steer? How do you give that as a leader?
The one thing that I really try to do, because I have firstly grown up on TV and then grown up on social media. Mm-hmm. So there's always been a platform, and I've very much sat in a space of, and I forget what it's called, but observing myself. And that's spun me out a lot of the time, because it's exactly what we're seeing. I'd be living my life, but observing my life through other people's prism and lens. So over the years, when I've really lent into authenticity, for me, it's always been about leading in the example of being my weirdest self in public, and being my messy self in public, and being my chaotic self in public. And, even things like you talk about public speaking. Yes, okay, I'm trained in that. But let's say I'm doing a live event, or let's say we're doing this now. Sometimes, like all of us, your brain goes off on one. I like to say I glitch out. And in the past, I'd have just been sweating and panicking and worrying about what would be happening there. Whereas now, on my own live streams, whether I'm on a podcast, whatever, I will sometimes say, hang on a minute, let me just recalibrate my brain and mouth, because they're not really working together. And I no longer hide the mistakes, because actually when it comes to being a leader, if I'm really truly to lead from that in that space as a person who's saying be authentic, I've kind of got to do that. I've got to be authentic, which isn't perfection. And so for me, as you know, as someone in that space, I'm always letting those moments land, and that makes me uncomfortable, but also it allows other people to see themselves in me and to see the sameness in our chaos. And I often say to people, you know, we do not connect in our fake version. We connect in our mess, we connect in our pain, we connect in the awkward conversations that we have, or the admissions where, oh God, I did that one time, and that's where we connect. And so for me, I lead by being my authentic self and even the embarrassing stuff, so that I can allow my clients and my people that follow me to know that it's a judgment-free space. And actually, in terms of growth, that's where the growth happens, where we can sit in those uncomfortable spaces and work out what our next move is, what we would like, what, you know, am I heading in the right direction? Am I not? So for me, it's always coming back to, I never want anyone, I often say this, I'm not the guru of anything. It doesn't matter how much of an expert you are in something or how well read you are. That doesn't mean that you're human. I'm a human first, and I'm a flawed human being, as we all are. So if I lead with that, one, it takes the pressure off me.
It's true. Yeah.
I do not have to be. I can be excellent at something. I'm good at my job.
Yeah.
I'm good at what I do. I know my stuff, but it doesn't make me not flawed or messy or chaotic. Nor does it not make me, I still have to do all the stuff that I tell other people to do. I'm often ignoring myself and having to remind myself as I'm saying it to other people. I'm like, yeah, I need to also do that right now.
Yeah, take your own advice.
I'm taking my own advice. I'm not even joking. There are days when and this sounds hilarious, but my 2 books that I've written, there are times when I'll pick them up and remind myself of what I think. And then think, I did write those books, by the way, it's just I forget what I've done 10 minutes ago. I'll pick it up and I'll think, right, I could actually do that exercise today. That would be really helpful. Because, you know, even in these spaces of understanding this stuff, it doesn't mean that we're not human. So we're still doing the same stuff ourselves.
Yeah, of course. And what would you say, Josh?
Yeah, so just on kind of echo a lot of that. I think the most important factor that determines kind of whether or not someone quits a job or not is their line manager. And actually, so making sure line managers are equipped to lead is incredibly important from kind of a business perspective, right? But also kind of an employee perspective. You want to be led by someone who's going to support you. And part of this, I think, is really kind of echoing what Holly said, where it's not about setting goals relative to other people. It's about setting goals relative to yourself and make sure you've kind of autonomy to kind of do what you would like to do, but also within that structure and support to make sure that today is a little bit better than yesterday. And if it's not a little bit better, well, what can we do differently to make sure it is? And kind of just doing those marginal steps, because one thing that we see is that if people make incremental steps day by day or week by week, actually over a period of time, when you look back, it's like, oh, wow, I now can do all these different things in my job or in life that I couldn't do previously. So it's all about kind of having that supportive line manager who's also flexible enough to make it kind of at an individual level. Because it's, you know, I really like how Holly was saying how we're all different, we're all unique, and actually one size does absolutely not fit all. So if we have a line manager who applies one policy or one approach to everyone, well, that might work for some people, but you want a diverse team, and that's not going to work for everyone. So actually,
I don't know if you found, but in this day and age, it often seems those who end up in those line management positions just so happen to be the individual who was the best one of the team at doing the doing, and not necessarily having one manager or leadership quality at all, really. And it's almost like that second. But it's interesting that you say about, you know, that is the leading force in people leaving a job is the person that they're reporting into.
So important, isn't it? I know it's not easy or straightforward, whether that's in, you know, certainly in their education. I've got 2 daughters, so I'm very well aware of how that doesn't happen. And I guess it's the same in lots of businesses. It's trying to find that individual approach. Yes, that's not straightforward, but we know, statistically, we know that when we take somebody who's really good at a thing and we give them the environment to be good at their thing, they will flourish, your business will flourish, the environment will be better. When we take an individual and we go, no, you can't do it that way, you have to do it this way that we've created before you even came into the business, that's not helping anybody. It's not helping that person to feel good at what they do. And it's also not going to help you to have a successful business. It's not. And in the same way in the school system as well, you know, we have a one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately, at the moment. And it does not fit all. Yes. So it's...
what would you say about that in the education space? Where are we what does your research tell us about leaders in education and that sphere?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's absolutely crazy. So I think this kind of echoes what you've both actually been saying, where we kind of go, well, you're a really good teacher. How would you like to be a senior leader? Okay, fantastic. They're still doing some teaching with this other administrative responsibilities. Okay, well, you're doing really well at that. How would you like to be a head teacher? And suddenly, that's a completely different job. And it is kind of like taking exceptionally talented teachers out of the classroom to do something, well, they're not trained for. And do they want to do it? Probably not. But it's a good pay rise. It looks good on the CV, right?
Yeah.
But it's the natural progression in a school.
And to what extent does the climbing the ladder, whether it's education or any job and career, if, this is what you should be doing, this is where your path takes you, how does that impact well-being? Is there any kind of relativity between, okay, yeah, I'm climbing the ladder, therefore I'm happier?
Yeah, I think this comes back to kind of what we were discussing a little bit earlier, maybe, when we were kind of talking about, well, it's suddenly you're doing it because this is what you feel you should be doing, rather than this is what you want to do. And actually climbing the ladder for your own sake. Actually, if this is your ambition, you want to do this because you aspire to, fantastic. But if you're only doing this because you want to signal like your social status, right?
Yeah.
I'm no longer a secondary school teacher, I'm now the head of a school, right? That's as kind of socially signals like, oh, that's, they're good money, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's so it's quite nuanced like that.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to do a different thing, there's definitely nothing wrong with ambition or being driven, and probably all of us here are. But it's just making sure that you're enjoying that path along the way and you're noticing the joy in all of it and making sure you're doing it for those right reasons rather than the status thing or whatever else, or just because I think I should, or I'm not sure whether I should just be happy here. Like using the teacher to head teacher pipeline as an example, you might really love being a teacher, but because there's that maybe I should be doing that. And actually you were already happy. Yeah, you might have less money and a bit more money would be lovely, I'm sure. But actually, at what cost? I was talking to my dad about success recently. My dad's at a retirement age and he came from absolutely nothing. He went into health and safety, ended up making, crazy money in the oil industry, like doing health and safety. And then, he has a decent pension for himself and he's got himself a little nest egg. But we were talking about the markers of success. And I was saying, I've just hit 40. It's another marker where people start to go, oh, am I heading in the right direction and all of that? And to me, I think maybe because I've had big loss as well, I think that definitely puts things in perspective. I just really always go back to when it comes down to it, what is my marker of success? And I always think of, there's a quote by Bob Dylan I love, and it is, God knows when he said it or whatever, but it is, a man is successful if he wakes up in the morning and he goes to bed at night and in between he does whatever he wants. And I go back to that because I'm like, that's not about, I can apply to all of us because then it's our decision.
Yeah.
And for some of us, it'll be a very, very simple life. And it's not the trappings of some TikTok success or something else. It's just like, I've got a nice house and I feel safe. It could be really simple things, but we have to check in with ourselves to ask, is this what I want? Or is this what I think I should want? That's the key to it, isn't it?
Yeah, and sounds like it's just being nice and present, right? It's like right now, right here, am I okay? And I think January has a lot of weight to carry because I think lots of people start a new year trying to plot out the rest of the year for one. Don't worry, the weather's awful, but we've got all this to look forward to. In the
everyone's spent up after Christmas. They've eaten too much. They've drank too much. They've done all that. They feel a bit rotten.
Overdone everything, and then guess what? Back to work.
Get back on it. New year, new me. I mean, I couldn't hit that anymore.
No,
it's new year, same you.
Yeah,
I have for a long time since I've been in a kind of space where I sell things online and all of that. I have always said February is the new January.
Okay.
So the new January, like chill out in January. just lovingly zhuzh yourself into this year. There's going to be some people that are ready to go in January, and that's fantastic. But some people just need a light zhuzh into the year, and they'll wake up in February, and that'll be their January, or do it in November. Like I like to bring things out in November.
I know.
It's the pressure to. Suddenly we've went into it and suddenly everything's changed. It hasn't, has it? It was the same. It's going back to the tweaks. Like you're the same person. Just do a little check-in. Is there anything that you would like to happen this year? That'd be let's set a lovely little intention. I mean, even goal setting, which is hard to say in my accent. Goal setting is very hard for me to say. I'm saying it just for you guys. But even that, I think sometimes even the wording around it, it all feels very pressured. I often say to my client, let's set an intention for there. What would be lovely if you could get to the end of the year? So we can say this to your listeners, it's January. So when we get this time next year, what would be really nice with a loving, open curiosity to that, if you could make it happen this time, what would be really exciting?
Yeah, intention's lovely there.
Intention, it's just nice, isn't it? It feels less pressure.
It does. And the goal thing as well, it's horrendous. I don't know if you found this, but during January, you've got the people who are really good at it, right? And they're the ones setting the 4 o'clock alarms in the morning, and they're doing the new me, and they're going on a jog when it's still dark. And you can't help but see, you're exposed to all of this, and some people are really good at it, and the ones who aren't putting it on Instagram. So how do you kind of catch yourself when you're making those comparisons, and you're trying to push forward, you're trying to be authentic, you're trying to be the wellest version of yourself? How do you balance that?
I mean, it's almost impossible. So one of the things kind of we know from kind of a lot of psychological research is how kind of emotional states kind of transfer, both within person interactions, but also more modern research shows that it also transfers online interactions. Right. So if you're constantly surrounded by people who are making you feel not as good, not inadequate, or not as good, this is really bad for you. So actually, I do very little social media because it's in general it's kind of linked to negative well-being. So actually, when you are struggling, or there are certain things you don't really want to see, just get rid of it. I mean, that's the, focus on the people around you, focus on, the people who are, there to support you and know you and love you. And that should kind of be your focus. And then if you want to add stuff on top of that, fantastic. But oftentimes social media can be amazing. So it's great for reaching out to people, great for connecting, great for kind of finding out about the world. But it can also be very negative when you're comparing yourself in, January the 1st, these 5 people have posted, they've just gone for runs. And it's like 4 a.m. runs, and I'm like, and I'm still in my pajamas on, my second bite of, Christmas cake. It's
looking like a quality street at that point.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you, and I think that it's interesting when hearing you both talk about well-being, authenticity, putting yourself first, and how does this then apply to people in leadership roles? If we're thinking as plainly as possible about well-being driven leadership, you are now the leader of a group of people who feel like quality streets on January the 4th, not the runners. And you wanna be able to drive that kind of positivity and communicate that and make everybody feel good about what they're doing. And you're right, it's not the one size fits all approach. But how does that look, and what advice could you possibly give?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's firstly checking in with your people, checking in with where they're at, because there will be some people that are, you're going to be working with that are the 4 a.m. people in the ice bath, and they're fully there, in which case they might be already doing their stuff and they might be good. Whereas you might have your quality street, we're going to call them the quality street employees who are struggling a little bit. Check in with them and work out, okay, so what are our intentions or our goals, or what would we like to be happening here, and how can I support you with that? And then equally, I think it's also very important, because I don't want it to be on the leaders within a space to be held responsible for other people, because they can't be, but they can definitely encourage, ask the right questions, but also are there ways that we can be supporting our teams with teaching them how they can check in with themselves, giving them space to do that as well. Whatever way you do that, whether that's, bringing people into your spaces to help do, whether it's meditation type stuff, yoga stuff, well-being type stuff in some way, but also making sure they have access to that stuff so that they can work on that stuff, and encouraging it and creating an environment where that is encouraged, rather, and where, taking that time for yourself is encouraged, whatever that looks like. But I think it's about checking in with the people, and on an individual level, seeing where everybody's at in January. And
in your experience, if we're thinking about well-being driven leadership, it's quite hard to just give that a nice kind of solid definition. So do you have any examples of what the opposite of that might look like?
Well, yeah, so I think this links a bit back to kind of a lot of what we've been speaking about. So it's very much the individual needs to believe that they're in control and that actually they can actually improve. So if this is kind of back to a concept called kind of growth mindset. So if someone doesn't believe that they can improve or develop on a specific skill or task, well, it doesn't matter what environment you create, they're probably not going to do it. So one of the things is first kind of making sure they actually believe they can, and then making sure there's an individualized program that's fit for them. So I really like kind of Holly's example was, I'll do a plank, but other people hate it. So it's just like, if you've never done really like much exercise before, well, let's start. Go for a 20-minute nice walk.
Yeah.
Just go for some walk, fresh air is really good. And then kind of just incrementally, you did 20 minutes. How about doing 25 minutes next week? Just kind of having these incremental stages. But I think one of it, as I kind of said before, the most important thing is the individual needs to believe that they can actually change and develop. Because there's often this kind of preconception that, young people, children, they're great at learning new things. But once you get to an adult, you're more set, you're less malleable. That's not true at all. Actually, adults are as malleable as children. Not to the same extent. Okay, now I have to caveat this. I'm a university professor. It's not to the same extent. But the idea that it kind of is a switch is absolutely nonsense, right? Old dogs can 100% learn new tricks. So the idea that kind of like kids can learn new languages really easy, but adults can't, there's actually very little difference in here. Yeah. The only difference is kids believe that they're malleable and can do it and are excited to do it, where adults don't kind of approach it in the same way. So actually, if you believe that you can develop a new skill or do something else, actually, you 100% can with the right support and environment. So I think just kind of, so I think the really kind of thing to echo is, make sure kind of your employees believe that they actually can develop in this way. So encourage them and make them believe, positively frame things. So one of the things I used to do when I worked in industry for a bit, and I quit to go into academia because my line manager wasn't great, to be honest. And it was very much.
Can you tell us why?
So I think huge micromanager. So very little personal autonomy, which was incredibly frustrating. And when I didn't do something the way he wanted it, never, regardless if it was like right or wrong, it's not my way. If it's not a, how about we, why did you do that approach? Can you tell me about that? This is how I do it. Instead of having like a conversation about how we do something, because for research, there's often no one right way to do it.
Well, yeah, unless it's heart surgery.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are definitely wrong ways to do it. But there's not necessarily a right way.
But there might be more than one right way.
Exactly,
That's the thing.
Yeah. So it was very much it's my way or the highway. And I was like, well, I will take the highway. So
I love that so much. The things that you were saying about the belief, like I love that so much. And it's I often go back to that with when I was younger and starting out in the acting industry really young, and I wrote a letter. That's how I got on the show. I wrote a letter to them and they invited me in for an audition.
And how old were you again?
So I would have been 10 when I wrote the letter. And because nobody told me, and I'm very lucky, I grew up in a family that were like, go for gold. Like my dad would often say, listen, people will always know you're working class because your accent's going to give you away, and you've got working class tells. You're not going to ever get through on mummy and daddy's money because we ain't got it. But it doesn't matter. Go for whatever you want. The world is your oyster. Just go for it. And we have a saying in Newcastle, which is shy bairns getting out, which means if you don't ask, you don't get. And so I was brought up and just ask for it and see what happens. But when I went for 6 auditions for that and I didn't get the part. But because I was 11 and nobody had told me, because I was lucky, my parents encouraged me, went, just try again. My dad used to say, pick yourself up, dust yourself down and start all over again. And that was always kind of the motto, and still do that today. But what was interesting was that, and I look back on this recently when I was writing my second book on confidence, was that I didn't, after that knockback, think, well, that's it, then I'm just terrible. I didn't. I thought, well, it's doable because I got on set. Because I met the producer. So it must be doable. I'll just try again and I'll do it again. And that's the difference. Interesting, as you said, like with children, if they're in the environment that's supportive, then and that goes back to the teachers and things like that. If they're in that environment, that's incredible because they will just try again. And, with adults, I've kind of, certainly in the last year, been saying to a lot of my clients, be delusional. Like, I want you to be delusional in the things that you approach. And one of my clients recently just got a job, and she fully said to me that this is absolutely because I just adopted that delusional mindset of, what if it was possible? Why are we always telling ourselves that it's not, we have this really negative fixed mindset of like, well, it's just not for people like me. Well, what if it was? Because it has to be somebody. Somebody has to get that job. Somebody has to get that space. Why could it not be you? What about if we just adopted that growth mindset, that delusional mindset of, why not? There's a route. Like this is, you went back to there's lots of ways that don't work, but there's also lots of ways that do work. And there isn't one route. Like, my mind has always been an affirmation that I say to myself regularly, especially when I can find myself being in that fixed state of mind where I'm stuck on something and I'm feeling negatively. I will say to myself on loop, I'll find a way. I'll find a way. There'll be a way. There's a way. And that allows your mind, you know, from an academia point of view as well, it expands your mind to that curious mindset of there must be a way. There's a route. There's a route somehow. Somebody's going to find that route. And, you know, especially when we're talking about finding the people not to follow online, there's also follow the people that are doing things. Follow, you know, be around people that are innovators, people who are trying different things. And allow yourself to see them not as the competition, but as, well, if they can do it, and then maybe there's a route, there's a way of being able to do that. And when we do that, our mind opens up. It's just like, you know, I often think it's like, our mind is like Google. Yeah. If we pop into our mind, there's a way, your brain will keep looking for the way. Yeah. It might not be the way you thought it was going to be, but that was because you had a fixed mindset then and you thought it had to only be one way, like your line manager. And it didn't have to be just one way. You had loads of innovative ways. You missed out on them.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. It's I love. So one of the great things about kind of I do Warwick, and Warwick does really well. We do lots of kind of like widening participation events. So this is kind of we do lots of outreach events, and it's so much fun because it's basically going to schools and be like, hey, you are 100% good enough to be a Warwick. You absolutely are. You're bright. You're inquisitive. This is the type of stuff we do. This is fascinating. And we bring in kind of like other students kind of from similar backgrounds to them who are like, yeah, I had a great time at Warwick. And actually being like, no, this is not a place for you know, specific group of people. Anyone can be here. If you're bright, if you're inquisitive, if you're hardworking, you have a place at Warwick, and it's so much fun. So I haven't done many secondary school visits, but I've done a few, and it's so much fun. So what we kind of do is we typically think about like correlation and causation, right? So just because things are correlated doesn't mean there's a causal effect. So one of the things we look at is we see a correlation between chocolate consumption and academic performance. So one of the things we're thinking about, well, does that mean the Department of Education should give children chocolate and this will boost kind of test scores? And they naturally go, yes, this sounds like a great idea. Well, maybe. So maybe kind of releases endorphins, we're happier, maybe happier people do study better. I think there's a mechanism there, but it's probably not going to be huge. Well, one of the other things could be going is, well, maybe other type of investment behavior is related to chocolate consumption. So maybe young people from more affluent backgrounds typically consume more chocolate, and there's something else going on here. So correlation doesn't equal causation. And they just love about just thinking about, oh, actually, yeah. So when I look at it, and then they kind of think about it in their own lives, yes, I do this and this, that doesn't mean that causes this. And then kind of one of the outcomes of this is to show that actually socioeconomic status or kind of where you're from does not have a causal effect on your life outcomes. You are in control of this. And it's kind of like breaking down, it's really breaking down that you can do anything. And my mom's from Whitby, so I think there's the Geordie air. So it's this like, you can achieve anything you want. Just work hard, do your best, and whatever happens, I love you, and that's kind of that's what happens, and that's I think
so beautiful.
That is the attitude
to have. So important, and you know, just this week, interesting. So my oldest daughter is autistic. It doesn't really fit into the school system. She's you know, low needs, high masking, and she's very creative, and she's being pushed into a space where it's you've got to do this and do it my way, and there's no other way, and it's awful because you know she will look to me and she will go, "Well, you didn't even go to school. You were there 6 months of the year. You had an out," and I'm like, actually can't even deny that, and that's probably saved my bacon. And this weekend she goes to a drama group, and she wants to go to the BOA school in Birmingham, which is all creative. It looks amazing. She's going to do all the meetings with that. She had 2 teachers come to her this weekend who are teachers at her drama group, and she came out really deflated. And I was like, what's going on? She said, they've told me that's an awful school and that is really good. It's not very good and you don't do anything for it. And they were really negative. And it had me incensed because they were crushing out of her this enthusiasm and this hope and this, you know, this want and this desire to show up and learn and all of this. And we had this big conversation where I was saying, just like, you know, we were saying there, I was like, you can do anything you want. And those people, we don't know their circumstance or why they're saying that. May well be they want to be actors and they're teaching at a local drama class and it makes them feel sad. That's not your business to control that. But actually, you can do whatever you want to do. And I just think when we can pump that into children and then remind those adults that don't have that, because the adults need it too, right? I'm talking about kids here, but I work with so many adults that never got told that, that don't get told that. And then they have this belief, these limiting beliefs that I can't have that, people like me. And so when you're saying doesn't matter your social, economic background, it doesn't matter that, there's a way. And I'm always saying to people, every time you're telling yourself this limit, there's somebody else that's achieving the thing that you want.
What I love is in this conversation, we've covered leaders, as in, it might be you as an academic leader popping into a school. It could be you with your clients, but it's also people in a parent space. Teachers are absolutely leaders. And then what you were saying about this whole old dogs, new tricks is rubbish. I love that, because it's almost as though people who have been in direct line management or leadership roles for however long, they must be really good at it, right? But then this concept of well-being driven leadership is a really, really new one. And so where are we, do you think, in driving this as something really normal? It should be normal to feel well with your line reports as a line manager, and fostering that environment for wellness.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I'm working more and more with leaders in business and business owners and founders now who are really leading from the front in that. The few that I've worked with over the last year who are leading business have been saying to me, and it's not easy for them because some of them have not been in that space. They've been in that kind of old mindset of you just have to keep going, don't stop, keep going mindset. And a couple of them over the last year have started to put into their diary that other people can see, things like, I'm going to have the morning off because it's my child's school play, because I'm going to the gym, because because I have a counselling session, because they're actually actively, openly talking about that, not like, in the past where it might be, I'm having some time off, but we're not going to talk about the reason why that is. And the reason might be that they're doing a yoga class, or they're doing whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. They're doing something that actually pours back into them. Whereas I am definitely seeing that come from the top now in certain spaces. It's definitely slow moving because people are fearful of that, because they're fearful of change, but they are reaping, those that I'm working with are reaping the rewards, because in them doing that, they're also allowing space for their people below them to then ask for that, or to see, or to talk about that. And actually it makes a more healthy workspace, which means we're having less people that are going off in work, sick, and they're able to talk about that stuff more. And it does come from the top. It does come from them showing that as well.
And right back to the first point you made about being the role model, right? And practicing what you preach yourself. If you want to foster that positive environment, surely it's got to start at the top down. Otherwise, it's never going to really take hold, right?
Yeah, and then sometimes radical change is great, right? So I think it's 1917, Henry Ford. So a lot of people listening to this probably won't like him. So he set up the 5-day working week. But at the time, he virtually halved working hours and doubled pay. So 5-day working week, $5 a day. So he kind of doubled pay. And he actually saw this radical change with his workforce, so people were more productive. And this is almost certainly driven by well-being. So it's actually kind of going forward, how do we think about how we can structure work to kind of what is the next change? So I know some companies are trying 4-day weeks, kind of encouraging kind of parents to actually spend more time with their children, which I think's really, really important. This is kind of one of the perks, in my opinion, of academia, where during term time it's a little bit stressful, quite a lot of teaching. Outside of term time, you could do your research, but you can also have more of a family life, which I think is a huge perk. So I think having that autonomy is quite nice. So I think it's thinking about like what is the radical thing to do next. And I think we do know from research that if your workforce is happy, your business is going to thrive. And think at a societal level, one of the things countries are actually moving towards is how do we measure societal success? Well, previously, kind of like measures of like a GDP per capita. Well, now it's moving towards actually measures of well-being, how we're actually comparing societies. So I think we are heading in the right direction.
So I think we've covered so much ground. And what I've taken away is, I think the first and main point we made was be a role model, right? You want to lead by example in exactly what we're doing, especially in the fields that you guys are both in. Listen and adapt. I love that about having, the space and the environment to be aware of who it is that you're conscious of that well-being. You're minding your own, but especially in a leadership position, you've got to be aware and make that environment rather than being responsible, which I thought was really, really good. And then measuring that happiness, right? And keeping a track of how everybody's doing and keeping those doors open for conversation. I absolutely love it. So why don't we round off with the biggest do and don't as a leader when we're considering well-being? you want to be a do or don't?
Yeah, I would say don't try to make yourself responsible for everybody else, or try to create a space where you have to be perfect. I think don't try to be perfect and make it, I'm not wording this in any way, in any stretch of the imagination, in a way that's making sense.
But you're not trying to be perfect.
But I'm not trying to be perfect. So I think don't try to be perfect, nor take responsibility for other people. I think there will be my don'ts mostly as a leader.
Brilliant.
So I love that, Holly. I think we're on exactly the same wavelength. Because my do on that is support yourself, right? Make sure you're else in your right headspace. Because I know being in a managerial position or a leadership position can be incredibly demanding, often awful working hours. You need to look after yourself, because if you're not in the right place yourself, you're not good to anyone. Yeah. So you need to actually have that balance of, you trust your team, right? You create the environment and you've hired these people for a reason. Trust your team. And if for whatever reason someone in your team's not working out, don't blame yourself. Sometimes matches just don't work out.
Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. It's been really, really helpful, and I think a brilliant way to kick off a new year.
I loved it.
So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to Lead Out Loud. You can leave a review and follow us on social media, and check out the Happy Me Project, obviously, and Joshua Fullard's research on the WBS websites for even more insights. And that's all from Lead Out Loud today. Thank you, guys.
I loved it.
Thank you so much.